This is Dr. Kim Chronister here, licensed clinical psychologist. Today we're talking about how to overcome setbacks. I'm going to teach you the skills that professional athletes use to overcome setbacks. Alright guys, so I've had the opportunity to work with NHL players, NFL players, and what do they have in common? They all study sports psychology and they know about mental toughness, which is what I'm going to teach you about today. But number one is they take quitting off the table. Quitting is not an option for professional athletes, and it can't be an option if you want to pursue your dream relationship or your dream career. So that's number two. They don't think in all or nothing black and white terms. To a certain extent, they actually defeat their dichotomous all or nothing black and white thinking by thinking in the gray area. What does that mean? It means when they have a failure or a perceived failure, they think in the gray terms, meaning, yeah, it wasn't my best game, but I'm gonna go ahead and pick up and practice and do better the next time. Challenging that dichotomous black and white all or nothing thinking is really important. How does that translate to you in your life? It means if you've had a couple of bad dates or you've been ghosted a few times, you have to keep going, okay? If you've had a failure with regard to career or a perceived failure, you gotta play the numbers game, which leads me to my next point. Everything in life, guys, that you want to pursue is a numbers game. And once you think of it like a numbers game, certainly you have to be prepared for that opportunity, but it's going to take a certain amount of tries to get where you want to go. It's going to take a lot more failures for an athlete to get. And let me tell you something, perseverance is the biggest personality trait that I see in professional athletes. Why? Because they've had to overcome so much perceived failure to get to where they are. You know, guys, we see them doing great, we see them winning Super Bowls, we see them at their best, but we don't see all the pain and sacrifice and perseverance it's taken. They've had people doubting them, they've had self-doubt, but they persevered. So what's a really great tip that athletes use in their career? They manage expectations. So as situations change, so do their expectations. Now that doesn't mean that their long-term goal changes, that just means that they've got to adapt to their environment. They have to manage expectations. Alright, so I am a big fan of manifesting your dreams, but sometimes we have to get more reality-based and realize that sometimes some things will go wrong. So expect things to go wrong along the way. That doesn't mean you won't get to your ideal career or your ideal mate, but you have to expect that some things will go wrong so that you don't feel as vulnerable to quitting when something does go wrong. So another thing that athletes do really well is they focus on what they can control. They are very aware that there are confounding variables in their environment, like other players on the field, that they cannot control. They're not always in control of what a coach says or how a coach plays them or how a referee calls a shot. Alright, so that means that we have to be in control of what we can be in control of. One of those things is like what I talked about, your emotions. Another thing is how many times you practice. How much work are you putting into preparing for a date, preparing for a promotion, preparing for a job interview? You can control that. So focus on what you can control. There will be haters. There will be people who doubt you, that send you a message verbally or non-verbally that you will not make it. We have to be able to deal with these distractions. Again, expect them and deal with them when they come up. And how do you deal with it? Hyper-focus on what is positive and what you can do to control the situation. Alright, so this next tip professional athletes do very well, and some of us don't, and it is make sure that you're not expecting your past to predict your future. Guys, athletes know very well that how they did in college or high school doesn't necessarily predict how they're going to do on the next game. They realize that they cannot let their past run their future. They do this very well. So any kind of negating thoughts that you have, self-doubt about how you did in the past and how you didn't, something didn't work out in the past, or your career didn't work out in your past, or your exes didn't work out in the past, we can't let that dictate our future. We have to know that the future is our fresh start, and this is what athletes do very well. What we did in our past is only a learning experience. What a neutral way to look at that. It's not I'm a failure or I'm less than because I didn't do as well last year. It's I got to learn from it, and my future will not be dependent on what I did. Another thing that athletes do exceptionally well is they regulate their negative emotions. Sure, they're gonna lose their cool on the field when they get a loss. Sure, they're gonna lose their cool with referees sometimes. Sure, they're going to be disappointed with the coach, but guess what? When they're alone, when they're contemplating, when they're analyzing their next step, they're calm, they're collected for the most part. They're not going to let their negative emotions control their next step. So what do I recommend? Regulate your negative emotions. Yes, you can cry out of disappointment. Yes, you can get angry for a bit, but don't let that overtake you. Learn to regulate your negative emotions like athletes do so that you are able to take the next step. Visualization is one of the biggest sports psychology tools out there, and most athletes are very aware of visualization. We know that if we run a race in our mind rather than in real life, our brain actually lights up similarly to if we were running that race in real life. That's very powerful, guys. One Olympian actually ran a race when she was injured, and she was able to win that race based on just imagining the race in her mind for a month. That's so powerful, guys. So we can use visualization in our real lives for dating. So how do we do that? Well, if you have an interview the next day or you have a date to go on the next day, run that date through your mind the night before. Run that interview through your mind the night before in a positive, adaptive way. That can be so powerful on activating you the next day. Also, visualize yourself achieving that ultimate goal. What is your dream? And reverse engineer that. If your dream is to become such and such in your career, make sure you are visualizing that. How are you going to feel when you actually attain it? What is that going to look like? What are you going to be able to do when you attain it? Visualize all of that, and that's so powerful for actually going for your dream. Hyper-focus on your goals. Make sure that you're visualizing all of your dreams and take steps every day despite negative thoughts. Expect those negative thoughts. Expect people to doubt you and overcome. Alright guys, so that's all for sports psychology. Hopefully these tips helped you. Do what the professional athletes do in your career or in your dating life. If you want more tips, get my book, Peak Mindset, The New Science of Success. If you like this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. I make videos weekly about mental health, and I'll talk to you soon.